All right, welcome everyone to another episode of KUDEN. We're at episode 287. Holy shite. Anyway, so every week, right, I sit around and think about where we are, what's been covered, uh, what would be a next logical transition or a next logical topic, regardless of whether this is your first one or you're just one of our regulars that are following along. But so this time I thought I'd focus on something that again, it's easy to get caught up in the technique side of things. Although to me, at this point in my training, the word technique or skill or whatever, it's not just physical, right? And that goes along with this topic, right? Because most martial artists think Ukemi, right, is about rolling, it's about falling, breakfalls, right? What we might call the gymnastics of taijutsu, right? But several years ago, on a cold winter morning, right, I was actually doing a coaching call with my, I think it was my Friday coaching group, and I'd taken my grandson to school, came home, weather was decent, everything was fine. But during the coaching call, we had this snap freeze that came through, and like I found out later, there were traffic accidents out the wazoo, like dozens in the first 15 minutes, just in my local area. But anyway, I had a lunch business meeting after the coaching call. So, throw my coat, stepped out the back door, and found myself in a situation where I learned again, right, what Ukemi truly meant, and on more than just one level. Okay, what ended up happening was a fine sheet of ice had formed on the back porch, just a small landing right outside the back door, and then there's a series of concrete steps and whatnot. And walked out the door, slipped on this stuff, and landed full force onto the points, the edges of several of these concrete steps off of my back porch. And the impact drove straight into my lower back. It's imagine just coming down on something that is very chisel-like. So I landed hard enough to break the transverse process off of one of the largest vertebrae in my lower back, so my right side. And so it's a thing that muscles attach to for solidity, right? So when they contract, it moves other body parts. Anyway, later, when people heard about what happened, there were a lot of folks in the martial arts and whatnot that said pretty much the same thing. What they said was, I guess your Ukemi didn't work that day. But that's the funny thing, because it did, right? Because one of those steps, right, was actually right behind the base of my skull. And had my body not automatically tucked, had it not automatically exhaled, aligned itself the way it had been trained for decades, right, to do, you and I probably wouldn't be having this conversation. Okay. Uke isn't about being invincible. Uke isn't about avoiding all injury. Right? Ukemi is about reducing what would have been catastrophic into something survivable. Right? And then having the mindset, the perseverance, I don't know, the nin, you might say, right, to get back up through all that pain, not knowing that I wasn't supposed to be able to use my legs, and continue on, right? The fall didn't stop me. It didn't define me. It didn't break me. And in a moment, I'll tell you what happened in the moments after at the hospital, in the rehab center, and why that experience may have been one of the greatest Ukemi lessons of my life. All right. We'll get into that and more uh, about this highly underrated skill in our ninjutsu curriculum. Right. So I'll see you when we get back.
So, the big question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to KUDEN Radio. Real training for real people in a real world.
All right. Welcome to episode 287 of KUDEN Radio, the podcast for us, right? For martial artists looking for more than techniques, students of ninjutsu, and serious warrior protectors looking for real world training, right? Again, for real people in a real world, not fantasizers, not Bruce Lee wannabes, whatever. Okay. Again, if you're new to the show, I'm Dai-Shihan Jeffrey Miller. I'm one of the longest training practitioners of ninjutsu in the Western world. And joining me is one of my black belt instructors, my producer and man behind the scenes, Sensei James Alexander. And during this episode, we're diving into one of the most misunderstood and most essential skills in all of ninjutsu, Ukemi, right? Calling it the ninja's art of resilience. We know what resilience is, right? The ability to take on something that could really mess you up and being able to spring back or return to stasis, return back to normal or stronger, right? Very, very quickly. That's resilience. Okay. It's like a rubber band. It gets stretched, gets pulled, but as soon as everything relaxes, it goes back to its original shape, right? And if you do things right while it's being released and it's on its way back to its regular thing, it can do other shit, right? But what we're going to take a look at during this show is we're going to take a look at going from basic human instinct that we're actually born with through strategic movement to life mastery. Because the way I was introduced to Ukemi was pretty much the way everybody else was. But very, very quickly, I learned that Ukemi was way more than rolling, breakfalls, those kind of things, right? So anyway, before we jump into all of those wonderful things, James, who do we have on? This seems like it's one of those topics that like everybody's like, ooh, Ukemi, let's talk about Ukemi. There he is. Ta-da! Look at that. Look at that backdrop he has. Right? Cool. Anyway, who do we have? Who's saying hi? I'm assuming you're filtering out any jackweeds that try to hijack the show. That is what you call a castle gate guard. Right? I will kill you before you ever get in. Have you been to Japan with me yet? You haven't been to Japan yet, right? But you've seen pictures of like the temples and whatnot, right? They've got these big freaking, they look like action figures, right? These Nyol characters. Nyol means protector. Big fist. Sometimes they have fangs. Sometimes they're surrounded by flames and all that. But they're out in front, right? Sometimes they have weapons or just like Vajra, Dorje, Kongo, whatever, right? And that is this force, right? This protective force, taking a dominant stance, just letting people know if you've got any freaking ideas of crossing this line with the wrong intention, not gonna go well, right? So, and I know, I mean, historically and whatnot, in the real world, they are they're carved out of wood and that kind of stuff, right? But all of these things are symbolic, right? They're all part of, or supposed to be aspects of ourselves, and that holding the line, that willingness to get out in front of something that is worth protecting, right? I'm going to close my door now that I think my wife came home and the dogs just ran out of my office. I'll be right back. For those of you who don't know, I have asthma, and my office was supposed to be like dog fur free. Yeah, well, that happened. Not. Anyway, so cool. Who do we have on?
So we got Kyle, Alan, Dave, Jared, Victor, and Maury has all checked in.
Awesome. Very, very cool. Welcome, guys. Appreciate it. All parts of my either the KUDEN circle, right, which is our the new cool name we gave to folks that are our follower group, right, for the show. Not actual work, but subscribe and you're a part of the KUDEN circle. Anyway, so cool beans. All right. Is there anything else? Anything else I missed, or no comments, no complaints, no?
Nope.
I mean, you can filter out the complaints. You take care of those. James, take care of my light work. Anyway, all right. So before we go any further during this episode, right, I want to clarify something that very few martial artists ever look at, right? Even in the Japanese martial arts, right? Even in Bujinkan, right? Because what they do, and we can see this, right? James, you've seen this, and anybody that's been around the martial arts long enough, we're taught a definition for something, and then we just run with it, and then like we pass that on to other people, or it's like that game of telephone, right? And then later on, somebody tells you something, or you find out that it's that's not what it means, right? It means something different. It's not that it can't include that thing that you're talking about, but the definition is very, very different, right? For instance, a bunch of years ago, I was in a martial arts supply store. I'd just gotten out of military service, just gotten back from what was then West Germany. And so I was in my home city before I moved where I am now, in this martial arts school. And there's this guy, another martial arts instructor, right, wearing this jacket, and he had the word Shihan embroidered on his jacket. And so we had struck up a conversation and stuff, and things were going well. And I thought, this might be a good time to just make a little mention, right? Because we were talking about, bullshit here or whatever, And I said, actually, like, Shihan's not a title. Right? In Japanese, that's an honorific. People would identify somebody else as Shihan, somebody worthy of following, but that's not really a rank or a title. And our conversation went sideways fast, right? He started dropping 4-letter expletives. I fucking earned this. I'm not giving this up for any. Okay, hey, whoa, right? Being the bringer of truth is not always a good place to be, right? So anyway, what I want to do is I want to examine the word itself, this word ukemi, right? Anybody that catches Whiteboard Wednesday on a regular basis or has been to my seminars or anything knows that very often I start this way because you can make up anything you want, right? Or we can accept that, this is what people say, this is what they call it, whatever. Like ukemi, right? Well, that means breakfalls. No, Bob. No, it doesn't. Right? So could it include what we consider to be breakfalls or whatever? Sure. But so can the words sutemi, urusuhiki. Right? Okay. But anyway, ukemi, right? The word ukemi in Japanese is written with 2 kanji. First kanji, and you can look this stuff up, right? First kanji is either pronounced u uke, or the verb ukeru, 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 right? So ukeru, right, has the meaning of, or can mean to receive, to accept, to take into oneself, or to take on something coming toward you, right? This is the same uke in uke nagash, ukeuchi, ukewaza. It does not mean blocking. It means receiving, right? It doesn't mean breakfalls, nothing like that, right? It means to receive, to accept, to take into oneself, to take on something that is coming towards you, coming at you, or overwhelming you. Okay. In the most literal sense, uke means to take what is given. It's a type of acceptance. Okay. The second kanji, mi, right, means body, one's whole self. Can means like one's person, right? It can mean the physical body as a vessel of spirit, mind, identity, right? But here's the thing, right? This kanji is not the same kanji for Tai, as in like Tai Jutsu, okay? That body, or do, which means torso, right? In less than complete dictionaries, if you look up do, you could see body or torso or whatever, and it looks like you can choose, but right, not the same. Okay, so this is a different kanji, right? So this kanji, right, is not just body in the Western anatomical sense. It's the total self. Right? I'm going to talk about the three bodies here later. Okay. So we put them together. Ukemi is receiving body, or receiving with the body, or even more precisely, the body that receives. Not the body that fights, not the body that resists, not the body that denies. Right? The body that receives what comes without breaking. Okay? This single, we'll call it linguistic reality, right? This single term tells us something extremely powerful. Right? It tells us that ukemi is not about falling. Okay? Ukemi is about receiving life, receiving what life throws at you without losing yourself. Right? If you strip away all martial arts interpretation, the kanji itself teaches yielding without collapse, accepting without defeat, redirecting without resistance, surviving without breaking. Right? This is why Hatsumi Sensei always pointed to softness, emptiness, flow, and adaptability. Because the kanji tells you outright, to do ukemi is to become the vessel that can receive impact, receive chaos, receive hardship, and still remain whole. Right? And this, my friends, is worlds away from just learning how to roll or learning how to break fall. Okay? So before we continue on, James, anybody else sign in? Anybody else, any comments, questions?
Victor said maybe Shihan was his first name. His dad's name is Haku, and his grandfather's name is Soki.
Maybe so, Victor. Maybe so. I love you, man. Even though you're from New York, I still love you. Right? Anyway, Shoshi Malmstrom used to say, He actually lives back in Texas again, so he went back to his roots. But he used to say Texas-born, Georgian-raised, 145 pounds of ramen stomping hell. I got to come up with something for Victor, like, New York raised, New York grown, Florida. I don't know. So, oh man. Anyway, all right. So he's really diving into the whole sword work kind of thing. I gotta be careful. Like, he'll kill me or something. Right? So I can see him being like the Latino version of like who's that one character that Jeff Dunham has? The Ahmed, the dead terrorist, right? Yeah. He showed up in one of the seminars and stuff with a sword. I kill you, Sensei. So anyway, I digress. All right. So how about if I stop doing that? Anybody else?
Jimmy said Kumbanwa.
Of course, Konbanwa, Sensei. All right. So, again, most martial artists believe that Ukemi is about protecting the body when you hit the ground. It's not true, but like with a lot of the definitions running around out there, it is wholly incomplete. Okay? Because the ninja and the classical schools behind what we now call Ninpo Taijutsu, right? The Bujinkan schools, that kind of stuff, right? Saw Ukemi as something far deeper. Okay? Ukemi is not escaping damage. Okay? Could argue that point, but it's not escaping damage. Right? Escaping damage is, if I'm escaping damage, that's invincibility. No. Okay. My little story about, me slipping and coming down on steps and whatnot. I'll get there in a bit. No, I took some damage. Okay. Ukemi is the art of not breaking or to minimize the amount of damage happening. Okay. Physically, mentally, emotionally, or even spiritually, right? When life hits you, when you're like neck deep in chaos. Okay. So this episode is not about breakfalls. Okay. It's about an entire operating system of resilience that carries through combat, strategy, home security, corporate safety, relationships, leadership, and your own personal evolution. Not that I've spoken on that anytime soon, right? So let's begin where Ukemi truly begins. Okay. And so we'll talk about the first Ukemi, the human instinct you were born with. Okay. So if anybody out there, those of you out there that have kids, if you've ever been there when your child was born, I had the I almost used the word pleasure. Kind of, right? To be there for, let's see, 1, 2, 3 of my kids, right? 3 or 4, 3 out of 4. I was in Army basic training when my son was born, so could be in 2 places at once. But the other ones, I was absolutely there. 2 of which I cut the cord. And I should have known better. I should have taken my sword along. That would have freaked out the doctors. But anyway, but here's the thing, right? When a baby is born, the doctor tests something called the Moro response or the Moro reflex. Okay. What we might call the infant startle instinctive flinch reflex, right? Where they hold the baby and then they do like a simulated fall kind of thing, right? And it's a startle thing. It happens when, like for a baby, right? A light could suddenly be turned on, or there's a sound, or there's a potential for falling kind of thing, right? The body has this thing, right? And so it's the body's first Ukemi, right? This reflex is wired into your survival system. I call it part of the human defensive response mechanism, right? There's a lot of things that are wired into that, and the more of these that we can ferret out and understand and integrate into our training, the more we understand what Hatsumi Sensei and Takuma Sensei were pointing to when they used the word natural. Okay. So, but again, it's wired into your, primitive survival system, right? The arms expand, right, to catch or protect, right? The arms and legs spread out, right? Because the body's preparing to absorb shock, right? If we spread out the distance, right? Baby's bones are not so like hard and stuck into place as they are as we get older and whatnot. So they're actually more resilient to things like that. But the breath reacts, a bunch of stuff goes on, right? The eyes open wide to read information, there's a whole bunch of stuff, right? The infant, however, doesn't panic, right? Not the way we think of panicking, right? It's this response, but it's a we'll call it bracing for impact, but that makes it sound like we're getting ready to break, right? But it's not the same, right? Because children don't interpret falling as bad, right? They aren't afraid, okay? Children learn to be afraid, okay? Fear gets added later. But if you've ever seen kids play, or whenever they're doing things, even little ones, when infants are trying to learn to stand up and whatnot, they plunk over and that kind of thing, right? They just go right back at it, right? Often parents will go, they've got no fear. Yes, that's true, okay? But as fear gets added, conditioning replaces instinct. Shame replaces exploration. One of my teachers used to say, think about how, like when you were a kid, right? Get out there, you grab a stick or you grab a, tree branch or whatever. You're swinging this thing around, and inevitably what happens, right? Some adult or your parent yells at you, put that down, you're going to put an eye out, or you put that down, you're going to break something on yourself, or whatever. Or you might even get physically punished, right? So think about how good at stick fighting you'd be if you were allowed to kind of explore that stuff, right? Keep telling somebody that they're going to hurt themselves or they're going to, whatever. Eventually they just kind of sit down against a wall and do something safe, like drugs, right? But either way, right? Conditioning replaces instinct. Shame replaces exploration. Avoidance replaces adaptation. We stop messing around with things, okay? That's when Ukemi transforms from instinct to something we have to retrain consciously. Except now we're saddled with a bunch of shit that we have to overcome. Right? Fear of falling, fear of getting hurt when we bump into the ground, whatever. Okay. Anyway, if you're getting value out of this stuff, you know how this thing works, right? You're getting value out of this episode or KUDEN in general, right? Don't forget, like, follow, subscribe. You can subscribe on YouTube, or you can jump over onto the website, right? Like I mentioned earlier, right? Go to Online Ninja Academy. James can put the link in the chat thing there for those who need it, and we'll try to make sure we add it on the descriptions or those kind of things later for the audio only group, right? But you become a member of the KUDEN Circle, right? It's free, right? Anyway, so how does modern conditioning break natural ukemi? Okay. Well, fast forward, here we are, adults getting involved in martial arts, or when we first got involved, right? We got to do these things. Now, some people may jump right into it because they were in gymnastics when they were growing up, or some other sport, whatever. Okay. But for most, it's just my experience as a teacher watching this thing happen, because I was not a physical kid growing up. But when I was given this stuff early on in my training, I just jumped right into it, right? But I can remember still having some caution there, right? But I was in the military at that point, so I was perfectly okay with getting injured because worse had been done to me. But here's the thing: every adult carries 3 layers of conditioning that can collectively, or one or more of them, distort ukemi. Right? One is physical tension. It shows up by stiffening, by bracing, by what some of my teachers have called fighting the ground, right? Resisting momentum, right? All of these things cause more damage, right? Holding our breath, bracing for impact, all that kind of stuff, right? A second one is mental interpretation. Okay, we run things through a filter. Okay, I messed up, I fell, I lost, I failed, right? All mental stories that never existed in childhood, right? Unless a kid falls and breaks themselves, right? Actually physically hurts themselves, right? Jump right back up and keep going. Scuffed, bruises, abrasions, all kinds of stuff. Just go right back at it, right? But, and again, when I say childhood, that's a long spectrum, right? Individually, where did things break? Where did things get distorted? Okay. I don't know. I'm not here to psychoanalyze anybody. Okay. What matters at our age in training, when I say ours, that's anywhere between 18 and older than me. Doesn't matter when or how it happened. What matters is that it did happen and it's in there. And things like ukemi and the physical training in it, and some of the non-physical stuff I'll talk about here in a bit, that conditioning gets manifest when we run into chaos, life, hardship, those kind of things, right? Anyway, so we've got the physical, we've got the mental interpretation, right? And then we have social conditioning, right? This can be everything from familial, right? Family-based, right? Could have been something in school, could have been mentors, whatever, right? And this is things like instructions like don't fall, right? Don't make mistakes, don't look weak, don't get hit, right? Don't fail publicly. What will people think? That kind of thing, right? That kind of conditioning manifests in the dojo, right? As students who avoid rolling, avoid going to the ground, avoid contact at all. Talk about that here in a bit, right? Avoid discomfort, avoid looking bad or imperfect, right? Fear of what other people will say, all kinds of things, right? But in ninjutsu, avoidance of ukemi is avoidance of growth. Okay. Ukemi is not the body's surrender, right? It's adaptation to what could cause damage, right? Ukemi is not the body's surrender. Ukemi is the entry point to a new position of advantage. Now, this is very, very related to something called sutemi. Okay, sutemi is often translated as breakfalls, but again, you have the same kind of setup, right? The first kanji, the sute part of sutemi. Me is the same body, right? But sute here comes from the root verb that means to sacrifice, to give up, right? And it can mean to surrender and things like that. It can be used in words of that nature. But sutemi, the sacrificing body, is this concept is about giving up a bad situation for a better one, right? For the reason why we're stuck in a bad situation is because we're holding on to something for whatever reason, right? We won't let go of that which is causing harm. And the whole idea is to let go, right? To sacrifice the current position for a better one. Okay. It's very different. Okay. So again, Ukemi, it's the entry point to a new position of advantage. For my advanced students, when we're talking about like quote unquote failed technique, right? There's no such thing. Okay. Unless your lights are going out and like permanently or temporarily, right? No such thing as a failed technique, right? Any failed technique or any technique that's failing is actually the setup for something different. That was one of those hard-won lessons that like sounded like double talk when I was coming up through the ranks. What the hell you mean? Like this technique, right? Mushadori is failing, right? He's resisting it. My arm's in a different position. Yeah, so is his. So the question is, what technique is occurring because of what he's doing, right? The reason that Mushadori is failing and we're losing is because we're married to the idea that we have to do this technique that we started. Okay, so this is Sutemi, right? This is right, Ukemi, whatever, right? Giving up these things for something better, right? So Ukemi again is the entry point to a new position, right? Of advantage. Okay. So why then do most martial artists misunderstand Ukemi? Okay. We'll talk about that in a minute. James, any questions, comments? Anybody else sign in? Give it a little question break here.
Victor said, Ukemi, I remember more times than I wish, have received the floor more than I wish.
Yeah. It's okay. How many people would still be training in the martial arts if your first year of training was like Takamatsu Sensei's first year? Right? If you know the story, right? His nickname was Crybaby. And Dad was trying to fix it and toughen him up and all that. And Grandpa said, send him to the dojo. I'll fix it. And like for the first year of his training, 4 hours, right? He would show up. And of course, you know, he was a dutiful Japanese kid, so there was no like cutting out in class or whatever. It's one thing to skip out in a class where you have a martial arts teacher. That's a whole other thing, skipping out in class where the martial arts teacher is a family member who knows where you live and will, you know. So, but his whole first year, there was no other training other than Grandpa throwing him around and him learning Ukemi. Yeah. And if he hit the ground and received it incorrectly, the instruction was get up again. Let's go. Right. So Grandpa didn't care if he cried the whole way through class. Right. But the end result was a kid who couldn't be broken. People couldn't hit him. And if they could hit him, didn't affect him, that kind of thing. Right. So very different. Right. Anything else? Anything else pop in that I should address?
Trinity said hello.
Awesome.
And Alan said doing a break fall and having your knee land on someone else's foot can lead to a near-death experience.
It's only if you keep dropping your fucking knee to the ground in class when it shouldn't be hitting the ground and you don't intend to. And if you do intend to break your teacher's foot and end the class and take over the dojo like you own it, yeah, you're right. Near-death experience. Not that anybody else needs to know anything more about the experience that we're now sharing. Yeah. So, but I'm glad that I could be the tatami, or my foot could be the tatami, so you weren't injuring your kneecap because you kept dropping it on the floor. So, anyway, thanks, Alan. Appreciate it. You're in class tomorrow night, right? Good. Nice to hear. Okay. Anyway, I hope he's laughing too, because if not, I guess it'll just be me laughing. and you, James. James is laughing too. All right. So why then do most martial artists misunderstand Ukemi, right? It's because most systems teach Ukemi as 1, a method of safe landing, 2, a way to protect the back or the head, right? And 3, a failure recovery skill. Okay. Now, is that wrong? I don't think so, because in the beginning, until somebody like develops better ability with the body and the ability to move better from the ankles, knees, and hips to be able to realign the torso that is falling, better able to relax under pressure and not stiffen up under pressure, then yeah. Okay, I'm going to talk about the dens. Last week I talked about the Shoden, Chuden, Okuden, because we came at it from that Okuden level, and how if you caught Whiteboard Wednesday, I equated those to time in a fight, time in an attack situation, right? That students are initiated to training from the perspective of you're late to the fight, right? The punch is already coming, the kick is already coming, the sword is already coming, right? So yeah, Shoden level training, Ukemi, you're late to the response. You are crashing to the ground, so you're going to minimize as much as you can, right? So in other words, at this level, Ukemi is what you do when technique breaks down. Okay? It's perfectly normal, but what's not normal or intended in progression is to get stuck there. Okay? Because in the Bujinkan arts, and especially in the lessons from Takamatsu and Hatsumi Sensei, Ukemi is a receiving method. It's a perceptive state. It's a resilience skill. Okay. Ukemi is a gateway to reverse collapsing situations. Okay. And we can also say that it's a testing ground of nin, of perseverance, right? Because what causes people to crash is that there's a moment where they don't know what to do, or this flinch response and this stiffening up and whatnot to brace for impact, right? That moral reflex that doctors say go away in 6 weeks to maybe 3 months if the kid's slow. It doesn't, the parts of it never go away. Okay. That we don't flinch when a light gets turned on or whatever. There's still things that can happen, but it's more minimized. But the flailing of arms and the stiffening up and holding a breath and the gasping and things like that, they absolutely do not go away. Right. We see this in class all the time. Okay. Hatsumi Sensei once said, Ukemi is not escape. Ukemi is acceptance without breaking. Okay. And this isn't just physical. Okay. This is mental, emotional, spiritual shit. Take it out into life, financial, social, relationship wise, communication. Right. So a warrior who cannot take hits physically or metaphorically, right, cannot survive long enough to win. Okay. This is just like if I take people to the shooting range and their basics suck and they cannot hit a target. And what I mean by hitting a target is at 7 yards, the average combat distance where handguns are involved. Okay, 7 yards, okay, 21 feet. Convert for metric if you need to. If they cannot put their rounds in a 4-inch shot group on the kill zone, okay, or at least hit things where they're scaring the person and causing them to do wild, crazy shit, right? I don't care how many rounds that weapon can hold, because they can't miss often enough to win. Okay? We need to have certain litmus tests in place to understand what it is that we're aiming for, pun intended. Okay, so if we can see, I mentioned this earlier, right, with the Shoden, right? Shoden training is literally training from the perspective of being late in the fight. We could not escape. We could not prevent them from launching an attack. The attack is coming. All Shoden kata. The attack is coming. Okay? Everybody looks at it like, okay, when the attack comes, I'm going to do. That is not the ideal, right? I mean, it's not the worst case scenario where you get pummeled and stabbed and whatever, right? That's worse. But it's damn close because you're late and have to catch up and flip the equation. Okay. As you progress forward through the different scroll levels, timing shifts to in the moment, like now timing, but we're actually just ahead of their physical attack to way ahead. Like we can see it coming. We can, right? And of course, some lineages have, scrolls that kind of fit in between each of these that kind of explore things from a different level. But the basic Shoden, Chuden, Okuden, right? So, but Ukemi is timing. If we think about this, right? It's in reverse. Okay. So again, like I said, last week we explored the 3 dens of training. So this episode, we're going to view them through the lens of Ukemi timing. Okay. So again, just like I said, Shoden, late Ukemi, right? This is the realm where you hit the ground, right? You are in a collapse, reacting at the last moment. So you have to roll. You have to break fall, right? Sacrificing to survive. Okay. You're being taken down. His throw is working. His sweep is working. All that kind of stuff. Okay. At the Chuden level, right? Mid-timing Ukemi, you feel the collapse before it happens. So you begin to ride, to redirect, to sync and stabilize, to blend. Your Ukemi becomes movement, not reaction, right? Trinity and Sensei McLaurin were in class tonight. They were the 2 adults, and I had a couple of kids, and they were working on basics. But what I had the adults working on a couple of aspects in our mod 4, right? Specifically, because Trinity needs these for her next kind of thing. There are 2 very, very similar techniques from 2 different lineages. One is called Hanabi, and one is called Yubikudaki, right? Yubikudaki, crushing the finger, Hanabi. But what they are is somebody grabs you by the collar from behind and pulls back and down to drop you on your ass, and then they can finish you off, whether they're kicking you in the throat, stomping your skull, or poking you with something sharp and pointy. And they could be pulling, they could be pushing, whatever, but you drift with it, right? So if they're pulling, you drift back. If they're shoving, you drift forward. Tonight we worked on the pulling back. And drop into Kamae, do something to stall, and then you attack the arm and stuff like that, right? So I called it going to Kamae. I called it riding it off. But that's Ukemi, right? The skill at that point in those kata is Ukemi. But it's not the Ukemi that people think of because, right, you see the eyes reset, right? There's a system glitch kind of thing because, but Sensei, I'm not falling. Right. Okay. Because he yanked, you're in a bad position. If you stiffen up, you feed the yank, you're going to end up on the ground. Okay. But what we do, right, when these pulls happen, right, the instinct of the body or the push happens, right? The instinct of the body is to reposition the shoulders, right? Because the shoulders are either being pushed off the hips and knees, feet, right? Or they're being pulled out of alignment with the hips, knees, and feet, right? The instinctive response in the human body that has to be trained out and replaced is to pull or push against the attacker's movement. Okay. It's resistance. Okay. So if we're pushed, we tend to push back. If we're pulled, we tend to pull back. Right. So, but if we do that, we feed the attack and we end up on our ass or on our spine or whatever. Okay. So the Ukemi is to drop the hips and knees so the hips end up coming back up under the shoulders, because bringing the shoulders back over the hips is the problem. That's the detriment, right? So if we're pulled, what I had them doing tonight was shift, drop, right? And by sinking back and down, going with their pull, but to sink and shift, it takes the hips and brings them right back under the shoulders and reclaims balance. Okay, it neutralizes, which is what Ukemi is. It's neutralizing the force of the enemy's attack. Okay, so it is Ukemi, right? Ukemi becomes movement, not reaction. There is no need to do a break fall or a roll or whatever, because we corrected, right? We felt the collapse before it happened, because what we're looking at is the collapse of stability, balance, alignment, and then we ride or fit in with that to reclaim it before we fall down, right? But of course, we teach the falling down type of break fall first, because if that fails, well, then you've got something to fall back on, right? It's not the preference, right? To go to ground with him still standing, no, not the preference. Okay. As a matter of fact, I'll share a quote by, I think by Takama Sensei, could be Hatsumi Sensei, because I got everything through him, but that has to do with rolling, or by implication could be break falls, could be any of these other things, and how they relate, right, to training, to fighting, and that kind of stuff from this higher level. But either way, right? So KUDEN, right, middle level training. This is mid timing, right? We're correcting the collapse before total collapse, right? We're feeling it happen, and we ride it off, okay? And then at the Okuden level, if anybody remembers stuff from last week or last episode, right? That's preemptive Ukemi, okay? Here, Ukemi becomes foresight, right? We're not breaking, okay? Not breaking becomes the natural state, okay? Where others stiffen, you soften. Where others collapse, you adapt. Where others panic, you remain present. Okay. And this connects dead on perfectly, right, to Takamatsu Den teachings, right? The way Takamatsu Sensei passed on these lineage teachings. Okay. So in essence, this is the highest nin, highest level of perseverance. Okay. In Togakure, there is a poem about perfect or best perseverance, okay, good perseverance, lowest level perseverance, and sucky perseverance, right? I'll paraphrase here in a bit. But this highest level nin has to do with avoiding the appearance of an attacker, right? Again, I think last episode I talked about, and if I didn't, I'll catch you up on this one, right? Setting up our lives so that no attacker ever appears. That's the ideal it needs to. Setting up your life so that no attacker ever appears. Holy shit. Right? But before I dive further into this, again, I want to always kind of leave us some space and stuff for the folks that are on live to ask questions and whatnot. Of course, those of you that are catching recordings, if you're on Facebook, YouTube, even X, right? If you want to leave a comment, ask your questions that way, that's fine. It's always best if you send emails, because we're like everywhere, and it's just too difficult to get around to all these things. If you are listening to audio only, right? You're on Spotify or Apple Podcast, wherever. It's probably just easier if you send an email. James, are we using Warrior C, or are we using info, or is there something specific for this, or which one are we using?
Usually just the Warrior C.
Okay, Warrior, the letter C. at warrior-concepts-online.com. And if you don't know what a hyphen is, please don't mispronounce that. It could turn into something else that's completely different. So a hyphen is a dash. It's like the minus sign, not the underscore. Okay. So warrior C at warrior-concepts-online.com. Okay. So is there anything? Questions, comments?
Just Dave said he actually used to enjoy Ukemi, and
Yeah.
Alan said he'll be in class.
Oh, good. To both. No, that was for Dave there, Alan. Don't worry about it. Okay, it's all good. Yeah, me too. I used to enjoy Ukemi a lot, and yeah, arthritis and all kinds of shit does make it so great. Will I do it? Absolutely. Do I do it a lot in classes anymore? No. In a couple of weeks here, I will be 63 years old. Okay? And so, what's nice is that if I lose my balance or if something does happen, here even recently and whatnot, I'll drop in a roll, no big deal. It's integrated into my system, so it's not like I'm going to hurt myself or whatever. Now, will certain things be like not great to me tomorrow and all that? Yeah, of course, right? So I can't shut myself down in a way that I can't teach, but it's nice to know that if I have to do this stuff to save my life, then if I need to take a couple of days off to recuperate, it's because of age and Arthur and those kind of things, and not because I got broken. Because although that little icy thing did its thing anyway. So if that was it, then we'll just keep on going. Okay. All right, cool. All right, so in the earliest stages of my training, I was introduced to this concept of ideals and skill levels that I didn't see as Ukemi. I saw as, I don't know, hear the rules of the game, so to speak, or whatever. But as a military cop, I needed to be able to not die. I needed to be able to handle physical situations and stuff. So, I mean, that's where I was tuned. Okay. Because escaping wasn't an option, right? You call back up, you still have to hold down the fort and stuff like that. There was no run away, right? Civilians can run away, right? Cops, not so much. And soldiers, we never used the word retreat. As a matter of fact, we were taught that we were advancing in a rearward direction, right? We didn't even use the term fall back, right? But that was a different time. I don't know if they still give timeout cards these days or whatever. Anyway, so, but one of my teachers kind of explained it this way, from this hierarchy of goals or hierarchy of ideals, right? So the highest skill, again, is to shape your life so that no attacker ever appears. No chaos, no, right? So even if we just keep this on a physical level, no attacker ever appears. Okay, so I'm supposed to move to the mountains or some deserted island, or okay. I mean, that's thinking about those things, but I'm thinking, wow, that's how do you even do that? Holy shit. Okay. But that's the ideal. Okay. Until you're able to do that, the next best skill, right? The middle skill is to escape before the attack becomes contact, before the attacker gets close enough to be able to throw something. Okay, well, that's a little bit more doable, right? But that's going to take some serious awareness things, not being able to be blindsided. How do we account for attacks from the rear, right? Well, that's what the Godon test is about, right? That's the initiation to a new level of training. I know people see it like, oh, got my Shidoshi, I got my Godon, and usually that's the mentality that caused a lot of us in the old days to call that the go down test. But that being aside, yes, it's a level of accomplishment, but it's also a gateway to a whole new level of training. Okay. Because the Godon test is not isolated in a vacuum. all training after the Godan test, okay, should involve the state of being that allows one to pick up on that unseen danger, which could also include somebody from the front just blasting off something out of nowhere super fast, or the person who just snaps and, right? Because the reality is nobody ever just snaps. Okay. Now, but that does not cover the cold sociopathic assassin who gives off no saki. There is no murderous intent that's projected. Okay. They're just cold. Okay. That later is where Kuji comes in. And I don't mean the Kuji hand weaving kind of things. It's a, right. There's Kuji and then there's Juji. Right? So, but you know, if we're not at the point where we've shaped our life, or we did shape our life and one of these jackrabbits appears anyway, then we want to have the ability to see it before it gets close enough to cause harm, right? So we're going to escape before attack becomes contact. Okay. And then when we can't do those things, right, then we're gonna have to fight. We're gonna have to survive. Okay. But that's the lowest skill. Right. Hatsumi Sensei has said over and over again, right, to a ninja, to fight is to already be defeated. Okay. So, but what if I win? Yeah, but everybody knows you. You could end up with a freaking bullseye on your back or a target on your back. Okay. Again, as we go up in levels, from that Okuden level, we start to recognize that they're not isolated incidents. Okay. And if they are, lucky you. Okay. Because there's lots of other things that can occur in the wake of winning or losing. All right. So this is the correct progression. This is what I've just come to understand, right? But the reverse of how beginners train. Yeah. Because beginners must start with the physical. Okay? They have to, right? Because they don't know a lot. There's they're technique reliant. Awareness skills leave a lot to be desired, right? They're not where they could be or should be, right? To the average beginner, awareness means like just watching everything, right? But you can't do that. That's hypervigilance. It's paranoia, all kinds of things, right? Until we know what to look for, until we can establish baselines, right, of what's normal and natural here, and then the amygdala can then spot things that stand out, right? It's a crapshoot, okay? But that's why the scrolls start Shoden where they do, right? So beginners have to start with the physical, right? It's only after Ukemi has been internalized physically can it be expanded into higher levels, right? Of awareness, perception, presence, what we might call karmic foresight, right? Karmic here, the word karma means action and implies cause and effect, right? So karmic foresight is the ability to see something and recognize what that cause, what that thing or action or whatever, right, will cause as effects in the future, down the line, right? The chain that it sets up, okay? Also includes adaptability. These kind of things develop, right? Decision making. Again, back to the karmic things, choosing not to create future fires for yourself, right? Called my mom a name. I could not step up. Okay, well then don't complain when the cops show up, right? So this is Ukemi on the mental and spiritual levels, right? Ukemi is the art of surviving today so you can choose tomorrow. Okay? What do you want for your birthday? Well, I don't know. Let me get through today. Okay? And we'll talk about it. Right? So all of this points to the ninja's mind. right? Perspective and perception of several things. Perspective and perception of and about themselves, about others, and about the world, and the connection between these three things. Right? Again, we go into this stuff a lot in kind of add-on training and whatnot, right? But for those of you who have gone through the Ninja Mind program, right, you know that we cover aspects and insights that most people never look at. Right? They either don't think that they're important, they think that's woo-woo spiritual shit, or they don't even know what's going on. Right? These are insights that make you look at things differently. Right? They make you or help you undo years of pre-programming, right? Or lessons or whatever, right? About the way most people think things are, and or how they think that things are supposed to be, right? Fears, ignorance, false views, and more, right? If you haven't gone through it, right, this program, people have told me this program is life-changing, right? Obviously, I highly recommend it. James, can you put up the link for Ninja Mind there in chat for anybody that might want that? Okay. I'd appreciate it. Anyways, so at the beginning of things, actually, let me do this before I jump into this other thing, because I want to dive into that. My initial story. A lot of you guys know the story about the fallen ice, but we're going to put this in the context of Ukemi, right? Not just, Sensei was tough and he worked through things, whatever, right? I need you to get this, okay? If you are a serious student and you're looking to do more than just physical gymnastics and quote unquote ninja tricks and shit like that, and you're looking for help, I need you to get this, okay? Whether or not you need to get it, right? I'm talking to the serious student. I'm not talking about dabblers and whatever, because in the words of another teacher, you're all grown-ups. You can do whatever you want. You can choose to do whatever, okay? Now, those of us who know better would highly recommend you don't do half that shit. But then again, he defaulted back to, but you're a grown-up. You can do whatever you want, right? You can fulfill on the promise that the earlier you as a child made. Well, now I'm a grown-up. I'm going to do whatever I want. Well, there you go. Okay. But again, that's why we find teachers. So, James, any questions, comments, anything pop up here before I continue on?
Just Victor said one Japanese instructor once said to us to consider Ukemi as a sacrifice throw to reposition and avoid being hurt.
Yeah, and again, for those of you guys that have been around for a while, you're going to have to start putting these lessons into context based on the level of training that they were teaching at. Because those same Japanese teachers also talk about Ukemi in a way where you are receiving and neutralizing the force of his attack. You're writing things off, right? Uke Nagash becomes Ukemi, right? All kinds of things. So again, if the lesson was about a sacrifice throw where you're turning something around, now we're borderline Shoden Chuden, because a collapse still occurred, but we're transitioning that, right? We're using it to turn it into something else, right? Because we might not have been able to right the body. We felt it happening, but we couldn't recover, okay? So Shoden level Ukemi is you have no choice. You are going to minimize the damage or the force of the attack, but the force of the attack is, as you, Victor, you mentioned earlier, right? Receiving the ground, right? So we're going to minimize that kind of thing, right? But what you're talking about with like Tachi Nagare, Yoko Nagare, Kuruma, those kind of things where it's a sacrifice throw, or it's a transition, right? Where the break fall is a rolling recovery, is a turning the tables, right? I wore this for a reason, right? It flips the situation, right? One move flips the situation, and it turns it around, right? So you're not just surviving, and now you've got to get out of that space, right? In the middle of that collapse, you're taking them with you and you're turning it around, right? It's a bridge shoden chuden, but it's more chuden than it is the shoden, because now energy, timing, rhythm, those kind of things are what's involved. Okay, so cool stuff. Yeah, it's all good. Okay, but again, if you're upper level, you're gonna have to take some of those lessons you got and take them from just being a bunch of shit in notebooks and place them, especially if you're a teacher, right? Because giving people this context is different, right? Because I've got all kinds of people at different levels jumping on these things. Same thing with Whiteboard Wednesdays, right? And Whiteboard Wednesday, last couple of them, I've admitted, not beginner stuff, but it should help beginners put things into context and understand why they can't just half-ass certain techniques, right? Or they'll not get to this other level, right? So, but again, at a certain level, you have to tune your listening or reading or comprehension into certain key things, okay? That places that lesson that a teacher gave at a certain point. And also, I talked about evolution a couple of episodes back. In our evolution, we have to know what to let go of. Okay, so as a teacher, I teach certain things that I learned from other teachers, and I did at certain points in my training to students who are working on or entering that phase of training. The lesson is the same, but I don't adhere to that because that's not the level where I am. Okay, so we have to understand. And if you're not a teacher, then there's thing. Well, Sensei said, yeah, when in your training, at what point, right? Because if we're not letting go of those things, then we're either not evolving or we're contributing to our own confusion. And now we've got this muddled training that's going on, right? Anything else, James?
No, that was it.
Okay. All right. So let's continue on, shall we? All right. So let's recap this, or let's revisit this little slip on the layer of ice, and let's look at this idea of this real purpose of Ukemi. All right. Let's return to that fall. Let's return to the concrete steps, the ice, right? Broken piece of my spine. Right? I don't know if anybody knows what transverse processes are, but if you look at a spine, right, you got these vertebrae, right, and there are discs in between them, right, not CDs, but these little spongy layers that allow for shock absorption, kind of thing, right? But off of the bone, right, there are these bony protrusions, okay, and they have holes in them and whatnot that nerves pass through, right, and they're also the places where connective tissue, right, connects to muscle and whatnot, so that when muscles contract, right, then it can move something else. Well, if one of these things get broken, not only do you risk nerve damage, but because remember, there's wires running through these things going to certain parts of the body, but also things won't work so well, if at all, that are connected to them, because the muscle can contract all at once, but you're not getting a whole lot of movement. Okay. So that's what happened, right? I landed on one of these things and low back, low lumbar, right at the top of, just above the pelvic bone, broke it off, just cracked it, right? And it's just, there's nothing they can do medically. I mean, maybe they could have gone in and pinned it, but I don't think so because of how close it was to the sacral joint and all that kind of stuff. So they let it ride, literally, right? Hoping that, like, if I wasn't me, it should have knitted faster, but it would, it would hang out, and then the healing, the way bones knit and repair and whatnot, would have worked. But either way, right? So I ended up with this broken piece of spine. I was alone, right? I think my oldest stepdaughter had come home right around, it was after the incident, but I was alone, right? And I wasn't able to stand at first. Okay. Like, I could move my head, I could move my shoulders, I could move my arms. From the hips down, I was not able to function, right? Things felt dead and heavy. And I had this overwhelming drive, and I'll just write it off to an adrenal spike, that I had to move, because in the process, like, my phone was in my hand, that kind of thing, right? And I had dropped it when I slipped. My hands opened up, that moral response, right? And mid slip, right, tucked the head, shot the leg out for counterbalance and whatnot, and receive things as best as possible, right? But from that position, well, let's back up a little bit, right? So again, foot slips out, right? Body didn't freeze, didn't stiffen up, right? Didn't have time to panic, right? But exhaled, body curled and aligned, right? And I accepted the impact instead of fighting it, right? At a certain point, when the body goes, we have to recognize that there's nothing that can be done but minimize damage, but to survive that thing. That's Ukemi. Okay. You do everything you can up to that point, but at the point of total collapse, then we have to act to minimize the damage, right? So that in and of itself was decades of Ukemi, right? Doing exactly what it was designed to do, unconsciously, subconsciously, right? Because I didn't have time to think about counterbalancing leg and whatever. This is all thinking about this after the fact, right? But what was it designed to do? Minimize the catastrophic, preserve the essential, right? And leave me alive and capable of action, movement, right? So then, right, we're back in time now where legs are heavy. Like, and I have this overwhelming sense of, holy shit. Like, I know I broke something. I know it, right? I could feel this other concrete step, the top step, behind my head, right? Wasn't touching it, but when I relaxed to try to focus on my legs, it was right there. Had I not instinctively tucked, had I not instinctively exhaled and whatnot, again, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Okay? But instead of lying there, yelling for help, whatever, right? I forced myself up, right? Picked up the phone, getting inside, because again, it was colder than crap outside, and got into the kitchen, and then, like, I felt something move in my back, and my legs gave out, lowered myself to the ground, and again, having no idea that a major connection to muscles, right, that was required for my legs to work, right? I had no idea that is what was broken. I just knew that, like, I did something to my spine, and things should not have been stable enough for the task. I was told later. They have no idea how I got into the house. I know how I got into the house. Will, right? Grabbed my phone, called for help. And then, long story short, right? After a night in the hospital, I wound up in a rehab center, surrounded by people content to lie in beds, waiting for pain meds, listening all day long to, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your pain? Oh, definitely 10, definitely 10. And at first, on round the clock, right, getting these freaking pain meds and stuff. And the first full day I was in, my wife came to visit, or she was there. And I said, when you come back later or tomorrow, I need my laptop. I gave her 3 specific books and one notebook that I was using, and I needed a fresh one. Okay. Because I may not be able to move, but that doesn't mean training has to stop. That doesn't mean whatever has to stop. But the pain meds made it really difficult to stay clear, to stay awake, to stay whatever, right? So I ended up negotiating with my doctor. I said, look, I have a very high pain tolerance. And I'm listening to everybody tell you that, they're in a 10 for pain, but they're speaking normally. Like there's no shakiness to the voice isn't cracking, whatever. I promise you, if I say an 8 or above, like I'm on the verge of passing out. Okay. So can we shift this to as needed? And of course he said, yeah, we can do it. But if I see that whatever, right. I'm going to put you right back on. Yeah, fair enough. Okay. I needed my mind to be sharp. I needed to work. I needed to research. I needed to write. I needed to plan. I needed to keep going. Anybody ever heard that phrase before? Okay. That, contrary to popular belief, was Ukemi too. Okay. Ukemi is not passive. Right. Ukemi is the willingness to receive, adapt, and re-enter life or the moment or whatever faster and stronger than most people think is possible. Ukemi is resilience. It's the ability to spring back quickly to normal or better after that whatever is hitting hits. Okay. Ukemi is confrontation. It's taking hits. It's riding force. It's using collapse for one's advantage. It's to flip the script. Okay. I know I've got a couple of guys on the live for the show and whatnot that are going to relate to this because they were in class this past Friday. And last week's focus was on certain aspects from the KUDEN level of training, which has nothing to do with the techniques. It has to do with where the head goes, where the heart goes, or whatever. So I would have them, demonstrate something, right? So yeah, there's a technique, but the technique is designed to uncover things, right? And so I'd give them something to do, and then like just before they would do something, I'd say, oh, "Stop." Your head was on the attack you're about to throw and the target you're going to hit. And yours is looking at the hand that he's going to throw because he's duplicating the attack that I just demonstrated a defense against. And they both had this sheepish smile on, like I could read their mind. It was not that. I've been in both positions. Okay. That is a weakness. All right. And then we did different things. And one of these things led up to shocking the system, right? To see where the mind goes or the heart goes or whatever, and how that's detrimental. Okay. And so it didn't just happen in these classes. It's happened in other classes. And in many instances, it had nothing to do with me being a sneaky shit and trying to sneak a shot in on them. Sometimes I could have reached out to like fix the knot on their belt or whatever, right? And there's this huge flinch response. Okay. And so we had to have this discussion, right? Confirming that they both came from point sparring backgrounds. What does that mean? Okay. Well, that means that there's light to no touch, but a point gets counted because, right? But they blocked. Yeah. Yeah, they blocked. What'd they block? Okay. So I call this flinch blocking. Okay. Because their bodies never moved from that position. Okay. Everything stiffened up, and there was this same arm movement, this same block. And I told them, look, this is not your fault. This is not a you thing. I mean, it's a you thing because you're conditioned, right? But what you're conditioned against is not what you think you're conditioned against. Okay. This is not about blocking a punch. This is about avoiding contact. Right? You were conditioned to fear contact because contact equals what? Contact equals losing. Impact equals failure. Being touched, often in a lot of these things, as soon as a point is scored, what happens? Ref stops it, resets everybody, right? The point is scored, and then you get started again. Shit, no wonder you didn't have to move. If it landed, situation was over. If you blocked it, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. This kills Ukemi because this kills adaptability. And ultimately, this kills real-world self-protection. I'm not saying that people that are trained that way can't defend themselves. I'm not saying that. Okay? But if the action that we're doing causes us to stiffen up, we have to relax to move again. And I don't care how fast you do that, it creates a stall. Too many stalls, we're backing up. Okay? We have more than he does. He can be slower than us and still beat us to the punch. Yes, pun intended. Okay? It will be impossible to learn Ukemi, especially in the higher levels, the non-gymnastics Ukemi. Because real Ukemi, right, means taking hits without breaking, riding attacks or riding off attacks, right? Something Victor was talking about earlier with these like sacrifice throws and whatnot, where we're being thrown, but we turn it around, right? Flip them over, that kind of thing, right? That's redirecting force mid-collapse. Okay. And again, taking that to a farther extent, right, is turning collapses into reversals, right? It's a heart of Gyakuwaza. Okay, using Tachi Nagore, Kuruma throws, sacrifice movements, those kind of things, right? It's feeling instead of fearing. Okay. To a ninja, and I know we think of ninja and got the dive rolls, all kinds of stuff, right? It's all cool. Okay. But believe it or not, a lot of times those movements were more of a distraction, disorientation thing. Imagine a ninja doing like a cartwheel or a forward handspring or whatever in dusk, low light, or dark conditions. Okay, where it's just shadows moving. Okay, the human brain does not detect that as a person doing a handspring or a cartwheel or whatever. It's a flutter of movement that disrupts and breaks up the human form that is easily recognizable by the brain. Okay. It's disrupting awareness and cognition. Okay. But let's get back to Ukemi. Right. To the ninja, Ukemi isn't falling well. Ukemi is staying in the fight even while falling. Okay? Or feeling the impending fall and instinctively correcting so that the fall doesn't happen. One of my teachers used to say, it's really, really ironic, right? You learn to do ukemi and you learn to do it well, which means that you learn to soften your ankles, knees, and hips. And that's how you go to the ground, right? You learn to drop the tension or put the tension in one place, which is why we have these counterbalancing legs and things like that. The tension goes to a focal or a centralized location so the rest of the body can relax, right? And so when you get that, right, and you're really good at ukemi, and I don't mean you're good at gymnastics movements. I mean, you're good at recognizing that you're going to go to the ground and you're perfectly fine with it, right? What ends up starting to happen is as soon as you feel it and you just accept it, right, that you accept the ground, right? But as soon as you start to engage those systems, right, your body catches its own balance. But if you resist it, if you stiffen up to not fall down, more often than not, crash into the ground. So he used to always say was the irony of, like, you never get what you want in life, right? When you stiffen up, what are you doing, right? You want the clouds, right? You're trying to grab for the clouds, right? And you get the ground, right? You learn ukemi, you accept the fact that you're crashing, so you reach for the ground and you get the clouds. Like, go figure, right? So I want to shift into non-physical ukemi, and I want to look at something that, like, most people never look at because they're too busy looking at non-preventative defensive action, which is what self-defense and fighting is. I could not prevent it, set up my life so that an attacker never shows up. I couldn't escape it, and I'm left with having to deal with it. Okay? So, but there's other places that people don't look, okay, that are natural extensions of KUDEN level training, but this is also part and parcel to what Hatsumi Sensei passed on to Hatsumi Sensei in the form of articles or booklets or whatever that he would write for Hatsumi Sensei in between visits, converting a lot of this stuff into something that could be studied and whatnot as kind of like homework. Okay. But before we do that, James, anything? Questions, comments? Is anybody having a hard time following some of this stuff or a lot of this stuff because it's not about breakfalls and rolling and those kind of things? That'd be interesting to hear. And I get it. It's okay. So, like, admitting it does not make you a failure or whatever. It just means that we're in a certain area of training, or we're kind of stuck, or we haven't been exposed to these things as principles and concepts as much as we've been exposed to them as finite physical techniques. Anyway, what do you got, James?
Nothing at the moment.
Okay, right. In that case, then let's bring this into a domain, again, that most martial artists, most self-defense people never consider. Okay. Small percentage, but most, they do not. Okay. And that is ukemi as preparedness in the home, right? Home security and corporate business security, right? Workplace security, workplace safety. Okay. And before anybody like jumps off because see that you do this thing over here and now we're stretching. No. This was part of that stuff that Takuma Sensei passed on to my teacher, right? Hatsumi Sensei, right? This stuff falls under castle protection. Okay. Fortifying a stronghold. Right? Most companies, most homeowners, I don't care if you rent or own. We're not splitting difference, right? What am I going to call it? Most home dwellers, right? They practice compliance, not resilience. Okay, it's under the guise of preparation, or protection, but people put this shit in place and they never look at it again. Okay. What I mean by that is homeowners or renters, right, will put up those Ring doorbells or they'll put up security cameras and stuff like that, right? Because it gets them a discount off their insurance, not because they really ever think that they could be attacked or their house can be broken into. It's for a fucking discount. Okay. Same thing with companies. They'll do a workplace violence program or whatever, so they can check off a damn box and satisfy OSHA or whatever regulations, insurance specifications or whatever. Okay. It's not about resilience. It's not about self-protection. It's about compliance. Okay. And it's about like saving money or whatever, as opposed to actually keeping one's family safe. Okay. They install alarms, again, for insurance discounts, right? Or they might, buy into the importance of at first, but they don't bring up the thing, right? There's commotion outside, or they don't have things rigged. So, and if they do have things set up where an alarm will trip when a door is opened or closed or whatever, they very quickly put it on silent, or they disable the function or whatever, because it's fucking annoying. Right? Don't take it seriously. And if you think that that's wrong, ask yourself when the last time was that you heard a car alarm go off and you actually took it seriously and thought anything other than turn that damn thing off. It's fucking annoying. Okay. Car alarms are really good for, right? A little panic button on your fob and all that. It's to scare away any potential intruder that might be hiding near your car or waiting for you inside the car, because they don't think the same way. But everybody else around, if they look, it's to see which fucking car is going off, not who's breaking into a car. It's a false sense of security. Okay. Companies will post no tolerance signs for like workplace violence or whatever, right? They'll write policies that punish after the fact, right? People buy cameras, but never plan movement or safe rooms, right? Companies teach banned weapons on site policy, but never train for defensive action, right? Or they don't expand on the run, hide, fight training that's out there, right? Because that's 6 minutes and you're supposed to convert that into, right? But who's supposed to run? Who's supposed to hide? Who's supposed to fight? Most companies that I've encountered, right, their evacuation policy is global across the entire facility, and they just default to their fire escape plan. I guess that works, except where's the shooter? How many of your people are going to run right across their path? How many people shouldn't even be told that anything is happening, because human nature is some of these jackasses will go wandering out, either trying to be the hero or they want to, rubberneck and see what's going on, right? Doing these things in an incomplete way or for the wrong reasons, right? This is the equivalent of like trying to learn taijutsu without learning ukemi, right? Never going to be knocked down, right? Okay, right? Or watching videos and never training for proficiency. Try it once or twice, but okay, I think I got it. I'll remember that when somebody comes at me and my left brain takes a freaking vacation. Okay. And just like I said, installing cameras, but never looking for blind spots, never making sure that, we put them up and it's good enough. Yeah. Again, compliance is bracing, and it creates a sense of confidence because we did something. But preparedness, actual preparedness, right? Just like in our 8 phases of effective self-defense strategy. Phase 1 is general awareness, right? Not situational awareness, not paying attention to your surroundings. It's knowing that danger exists in the world and it can touch me, but it's also knowing what types of danger are most likely to come at me. what trends are going on in my neighborhood or my town or my part of the city, right? That could come into my house or could meet me as I'm getting out of my car, or that my kids are dealing with or could deal with in school, those kind of things, right? That allows for preparedness. And preparedness is ukemi. Right? Ukemi in this context means accepting that impact might occur, preparing for it without fear or fantasy, right? Designing the environment to absorb the shock, right? Having fallback positions, training family or employees to know the why behind the layout, right? And creating systems that don't break when the unexpected happens. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. There are some things you don't want to fucking cross. You don't want to end up at that bridge with no plan. Okay? It's the dumbest. That's right up there with I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6. Well, maybe so, but only for so long, because if that doesn't go well, then you're going to be defending against multiple attackers in the prison shower and whatever. Okay. These things make people feel comfortable, instill a sense of confidence. It's false, right? I mean, do they feel confident? Yeah, they feel confident, but it's not based on anything. It's based on bullshit because it's the lazy way out. Okay. This is not just learning the different ukemi, right? Like rolls, leaping, break falls, soft falls, whatever, right? But what conditions would cause any one of these things to be needed? For instance, right? I ask students, right? We learned rolling in Mod 2, 8-directional rolling, right? Forward, diagonal, right, left, side rolls, hip rolls, right? Straight back, right, left to the rear, that kind of thing, right? But then, like in Mod 4, we don't just learn, like we learn rolls off of break falls, right? So we're learning these break falls, right? We're dropping down, leg goes out, we drop, or it goes out to the side, we drop, right? Those kind of things, right? So, but why, right? We learned how to roll. Why do we have to learn that shit, right? Well, because rolling is based on lateral movement. The body is being sent in a direction, right, at the ground, and there's momentum that can't be stopped. So this is a way to ride the momentum, change the body, Tai Jutsu, body changing skills, right, to adapt to both not just the ground, but the inertia and the movement, right? Ride that off, recenter ourselves. Break falls, right, is when the legs are kicked out or slip out from under us and the torso is dropping. There is no lateral movement or inertia. We have to transition from that to either save ourselves, like I did on the steps, right? Or transition from the fall into turning that into a roll. But now the roll is to remove ourselves from that dead end space where we could be easily attacked as a follow-up, right? Or something's falling or crashing down. We need to get out of that space as a part of the receiving and moving. Completely different conditions. One, the torso is moving laterally through space. The other one, the torso is dropping in space. The recovery is different. So we're given different skills because the conditions are different. For a Shoden level student, it's just learn the damn moves and be able to do them well. Okay? Chuden level student, things are being applied to you, wrist reversals, throws, that kind of thing, and we have to do it. So for a Shoden level student, right, it's all about me, right? If I'm in the Shoden level, it's all about me, right? I can roll at my own timing. I can roll whatever directions I want, that kind of thing. KUDEN level rolling or breakfalls or whatever is pressure is being applied to me. My leg is being swept out from under me, or a wrist lock is being applied or whatever. And I have to adapt to that and use the roll, the direction, whatever that matches that. I let them, it's about them, what they're doing to me, the speed, the direction, and all that. I have to adapt to that. Okay. Okuden is understanding why rolls and breakfalls and leaping. Okay. Leaping is for transitioning across a space that rolling across would not be safe. Okay. Soft falls are like breakfalls, except you're in control. You can use that breakfalling action as an attack or defensive action, not as a survival action. Okay. The conditions dictate the why. Okay. So anyway, back to castle security, right? In my own home, I've got items placed strategically, not just decoratively. They are decorative, but they're placed strategically. Furniture is positioned intentionally. Right? Certain weapons and tools are hidden in places that are predictable to me. Like if somebody showed up at my door and said, "Get your fucking hands up." There's things that from this natural position, whoa, hey, that I can get in my hands, but my hands are out of sight for him and I'm complying. So just like with all good ninjutsu stuff, the attacker gets what he wants, just not the way he wants it. Okay. So again, these things are hidden and predictable to me, but invisible to others places, right? So visitors to the house, they can't see the weapons. Okay. They can't see what I put where, right? Out of sight, out of mind, right? Kids are gone now, but my wife knows the layout and purpose. Okay. We've rehearsed scenarios subtly and without panic, right? My kids, Trinity, right? She doesn't live at home anymore, not with me, right? But she freaked out some of her college friends and stuff when they found out that she might have carried a tool or two when they were out and stuff, right? Made some feel safe, made some kind of worry, right? But she grew up with this stuff, right? The way I carry my clip knife, right? Now, pagers aren't a thing anymore, but my girls had to learn at a certain point when people pointed out, like they pointed a belt or a pocket, like her older sister, it's like 6 years. So a big difference in time and technology. But, point at somebody's belt and go, "What's that?" And the person would say, "Oh, it's a pager, just like your daddy's." And I had to stop her from going, "Oh, that's not a pager. That's daddy's knife." Right. And I'll tell you later. Right. And then I had to explain to her that, see, they see that clip and they assume this, and we're going to let them do that, aren't we? Yes, Daddy. Awesome. Great. But I taught my girls, right, that we had these little things, right? We're move them off to a side and whatnot behind me. And so it looks perfectly innocuous, right? Where I'm moving my kid back behind me to save myself, but nobody's watching the kid. So I taught my girls to take the knife out of the pocket. I don't know if Trin remembers this or not. Take the knife out of my pocket and lay it in my hand. So now nobody catches me draw a weapon. Right? These kind of things. Why? Because I had to think ahead of potential attack scenarios that I could then develop response plans for. Okay? That's Ukemi. Okay? Not paranoia, not fear. Setting things up, right? It's just simply setting things up in a way that I won't break when force enters the system, when the bad guy shows up. All right. So before I talk about emotional and spiritual Ukemi, kind of round things out, James, anything else pop up?
No, nothing new.
Okay. So in that case, right. So Ukemi also applies to grief, aging, Injury, already talked about that, right? Illness, leadership situations, parenting, relationships, purpose, right? The ninja's primary principle of nin, right? Perseverance expresses itself here. Okay? Aging warriors must learn new ukemi. Right? We have to accept the pain of movement, accepting slower recovery, accepting the body's changing conditions. Same thing goes for people that have been injured or, that might have an illness or something like that. Right? Hatsumi Sensei learned this after illness, right? After spending years focusing on being the harder, the stronger, the faster, whatever, right? He had to learn this, right? That's why he says the secret to real martial arts was not harder, stronger, faster, but softer, emptier, more receptive, more effortless. This is the ukemi of the spirit. This is the okuden level that most people never reach because they're too busy trying to win. A warrior doesn't need to win. He needs to survive. She needs to adapt. They need to continue. And they need to grow. Right? This goes hand in hand with many of the training and development areas in the Togakure Ninja's Seishin Teki Kyoyo, right? Especially the core elements that make up the book that I put out, right? Again, James, for those who don't have it, right? Put the link up. Yep, shameless plug. So, but it's the same thing. All of these things tie in to the same concept, okay? So, ukemi is not ukemi itself, this idea of receiving body, accepting body, right? There's a concept, right? When we use the term mi, this type of body, right? In Mikyo, we have this concept of the Trikaya, the three bodies, right? The physical body, the mental, kind of psychological, right? Where we're paying attention out, right? Away from ourselves, and the spiritual body. But again, not woo-woo, not religious. What we're talking about is connections to things, right? We're tapped in and connected. People, places, things, situations, conditions, environments, right? You know the old joke, right? Monk walks into a pizza shop and says, "Make me one with everything." You know the one. Anyway, and so ukemi crosses these lines, right? It's not just about the physical body. It's also about the mental body, the spiritual body, right? So, but it could also be extended out into the familial body, the dojo body, right? My dojo and my people have recovered from, right? The explosion that resulted in the fire that took out the previous dojo back in June, right? Everybody collectively, right, did something. Some chipped in money, others time, effort, right? Storage spaces, all kinds of stuff, because the dojo needed to survive. Even if it was going to be in a different location, it needed to survive. Right? Same thing with a family. A family that can't survive stress, that's easily broken. Right? Ukemi. Okay? So it's not just breakfalls. It's not in and of itself. Ukemi is not breakfalls. Ukemi in and of itself is not rolling. Ukemi in and of itself is not falling safely. Does it include those things? Sure. But it's certainly not limited to that. Okay? One, the word itself does not mean breakfall. Right? As a matter of fact, it doesn't mean falling at all, right? It means surviving a collapse or preventing a collapse, okay? What ukemi is, though, is presence under pressure. It's adaptability in the unexpected. It's resilience during times of adversity. It's reorientation during collapse. It's perseverance in hardship. It's strategic softening in conflict. And it's spiritual flexibility in life. It is the first skill you were born with, and the skill most people lose as conditioning, fear, pride, and ego bury it. But once you recover it, right? Once you unlock it, you unlock something that cannot be taken from you. Because Ukemi is the art of never breaking, not physically, right? Even the human body, right? If you haven't gotten this lesson yet, here it is, right? We're all easy to kill. Me, Hatsumi Sensei, whatever, okay? If it's not a person, it'll be a virus, or it'll just be universal truth, right? Things, it's going to break, right? This is not about just the body. It's about the mind, the heart, the spirit, right? So it's the art of never breaking, even when life tries its hardest to crack you open. Okay. So before I open things up for any last minute questions or whatever, right? If tonight's episode helped you see Ukemi differently, if it opened a door for you, if it challenged your assumptions, then you're definitely going to want to catch Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday, right? Because I'm going to be looking at things obviously from a more physical strategy, tactical kind of perspective there. And then you're going to want to join us for this Friday's masterclass, right? Because we're going to be training the physical side of this as usual, right? But we're going to be looking at how to take hits, how to ride force, right? How to use collapse. And here's the caveat, the caveat, right? Without relying on rolls or breakfalls. Okay. And here's that quote that I promised. Takuma Sensei's lesson. Rolling is for training, not fighting. Interesting. All right. So before I wrap things up, James, anything? I put them all to sleep again? Stun them into silence.
It would appear so.
It would appear. Seriously?
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Do you have anything to throw on top of this fire? You've certainly learned lessons in Ukemi and resilience and being able to spring back better. Life throws shit at us all the time, right? But I have a student who is he's a martial arts teacher in a different style, but he trained with me for a long time. And we were having lunch one time, and I think he had listened to like episode, what was it, 67, 68, but that comeback thing, restart on whatever. I told my backstory, and he said, it's just amazing how different people can go through the same type of situations, or some people can go through worse and some people can go through less, and some can survive it and others just get absolutely broken by it, right? So just to be clear, yeah, shit happens, but it's not that shit happens, it's what we do when shit happens. Right? That's Ukemi. Right? The ability to receive it, take it on, transmute it, right? And it's not that we won't get broken, right? Trust me, right? My brain at almost 63, like I still think I should be invincible. However, sitting down for this amount of time or getting up first thing in the morning, I need, 5 to 15 steps to get the joints relubricated, and right. And there's pain, and there's, because it's the natural part of life. But I'm the guy you're gonna see them dragging, kicking, and screaming on my way to the grave because I'm not going easily. Or they'll just pull the plug and I'll drop in place. But I'm clear that can happen too. Which is what makes it important that every day. I was just talking to Trent about this earlier, right? Which is why we need to appreciate whatever the time is, right? Could get together with somebody and find out that one of you has cancer and stuff. Most people go straight in the morning, wasting the amount of time that they've got left. Instead of building memories of the time that we had together. Or you have a lot of time together. And then at the end, everybody's dwelling on the thing that's causing the end instead of, look at all of this. Look at the great times we had. Right? That's Ukemi. Right? Because chaos and all this shit's going to happen. Okay? Anyway. So, anything else? Any last minute trickle come in there?
Dave said very useful perspective for everyone. Alan said
Dave's my value checker. He's no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. Otherwise, I just wasted 2 hours of people's time. I didn't waste mine because I think this needs to get out there. Right? Everybody needs, even if they're not at a Chuden level or Ukuden level of training, they need hints and looks and glimpses of these levels to understand that it's not like mastery is not Shoden level training with just technique accumulation and we're just better at physical skills. Because sometimes you are not going to be the physically stronger, faster, whatever, right? The ability to accept that I have to put up with this douchebag that I work with because I can't throat punch him, or I have to put up with, who knows, the political environment, the fucking neighbors that move next door because they own the place, whatever, right? The ability to adapt around that and not let it just eat you alive. And how that acceptance is not rolling over or failure or enslavement or all kinds of fucked up kind of perspectives, right? Right? It's also spoken in the Serenity Prayer that shows up in many different religions, but I encountered it growing up in Christianity, right? Where part of it says, right, the ability to change what I can, accept what I cannot, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's spiritual Ukemi. Okay. So, any last minute? Anything on top of Dave's or?
Kyle said good stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Of course, as always, right? Thanks for watching, or if you're on, audio only, whatever, right? Thanks for listening. I appreciate it. And as always, we'll see you next time on KUDEN.
Get more of KUDEN Radio, subscribe through your favorite podcasting site, or join our clan of serious modern warriors at onlineninjaacademy.com.